Hello guys, in today's video we are going to discuss about alcohol metabolism, which is also called as ethanol metabolism. Okay, before we directly enter into the pathway, let me give you a bit introduction about this alcohol metabolism. If you are consuming alcohol or if you have ever consumed alcohol, you might have experienced a hangover. You know exactly what are the effects of ethanol metabolism are. So these effects are most commonly in the form of headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, dry mouth, and fatigue, right? Just to name a few of the most common manifestations which are related to the alcohol consumption. But I think you might have noticed that few individuals among your friends group who feel the effects of alcohol a bit faster, getting what is known as alcohol flushing reaction. And you might want to blame the main culprit of this is the alcohol. But remember, the major contributor to this hangover is actually the acetaldehyde, but not exactly the alcohol, which is the metabolite of ethanol metabolism. This is what as a medical student or a doctor you need to understand in detail. So we have to discuss in little bit more detail about the ethanol metabolism, and also we need to understand in detail regarding the metabolic processes such as gluconeogenesis and what is the effect of alcohol with the gluconeogenesis also, right? Okay. Whenever we consume alcohol or once you take a sip of alcohol, we can say, it is readily absorbed into the bloodstream through the mucosal lining of the gastrointestinal tract, which means the absorption is pretty rapid. And remember, about 10% of the ingested alcohol evaporates by means of breath and sweat, or maybe few amounts are excreted in the urine tube. And the remaining part, like 90%, remains in the bloodstream, and from the blood it has to reach liver because the enzymes of the alcohol metabolism are present in the liver. So the 90% of this alcohol metabolism takes place in the liver, right? Takes place in the liver. Remember guys, the major pathway is in the liver. The enzymes are present in the liver. So the major liver enzymes responsible for metabolizing alcohol are two. One is known as alcohol dehydrogenase, ADH we can say, alcohol dehydrogenase, and second one is called as acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Okay, we can say that ALDH. One is alcohol dehydrogenase and second one is the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Now, the conversion of ethanol to acetaldehyde, takes place in the cytosol. Right? Using one molecule of NAD plus to convert into NADH in this process. So NADH is produced in the cytosol. In this process. So now, whatever may be the acetaldehyde which is produced from the cytosol, it enters mitochondria. Okay, from the cytosol, it enters mitochondria where it is acted upon the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Right, where it is acted upon acetaldehyde dehydrogenase in the mitochondria, which converts acetaldehyde to acetate. And in this process, another molecule of NAD plus gets converted to NADH. Right? NADH. So remember guys, in this pathway, the first reaction is taking part in the cytosol to produce one molecule of NADH. And second reaction is taking place in the mitochondria to produce another molecule of NADH. So one molecule of NADH is produced in the cytosol and another molecule of NADH is produced in the mitochondria. So irrespective of the location, we know that NADH should be finally transported. This NADH should be transported to electron transport chain. NADH should be transported electron transport chain for the production of ATP. For the production of ATP. Right? We know this. Yeah. So now, I can say that these are the major pathways. These are the major pathways. But can you see that there are additional routes of the ethanol metabolism? Right? There are the additional routes of ethanol metabolism. Yes. So the enzyme called as cytochrome P450-2E1. What is the name of the enzyme? Cytochrome P450-2E1. In short form, majority of the authors, they may write like CYP2E1. Okay. So this enzyme is responsible for the conversion of ethanol to acetaldehyde. Ethanol to acetaldehyde. And this is taking part in the microsomes. Microsomes. It is very, very important for you to remember that whenever a person is consuming like very pretty lighter amounts of like alcohol, this pathway is not predominant. So majority of the pathway is taking part in the liver itself. But if someone is taking like heavy amounts of alcohol, like heavy consumption of alcohol, then only this microsomal enzymes of cytochrome P450 gets activated, where it converts the ethanol to acetaldehyde. But in this process, instead of NAD is getting converted to NADH, NADPH is utilized in the presence of molecular oxygen to convert into NADP+. So therefore, one important point we need to remember that this CYP2E1 is not activated unless large amounts of alcohol are consumed. Now, so not only this, we can see another reaction at the bottom, another bypass pathway we can see here. This pathway is taking part in the peroxisomes. Right? Peroxisomes, and the enzyme name is Catalase. Enzyme name is Catalase. So this Catalase enzyme also converts ethanol to acetaldehyde in the peroxisomes, but in this process, hydrogen peroxide gets converted to water. These are the two bypass pathways we can say. So this is the overall metabolic pathway of the alcohol metabolism. But in this entire process, as I mentioned you in the beginning, who is the main culprit? Is it ethanol or acetate or acetaldehyde, which is responsible for the clinical manifestations which are associated with the consumption of alcohol? It is acetaldehyde. So the intermediate product, which is called as acetaldehyde, is actually associated with majority of the toxic effects of the alcohol, because this acetaldehyde can damage liver cells. This acetaldehyde can damage brain cells, pancreas, as well as the gastrointestinal tract. Right? Not only that, generally the impairment of the memory when someone consumes heavy amounts of alcohol is mainly associated with the acetaldehyde only. Right? But fortunately, the acetaldehyde has relatively shorter half-life. Therefore, it gets immediately converted to acetate in the process of detoxification in the mitochondria by acting upon this ALDH, that is acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, and this acetate gets finally converted to carbon dioxide and water. The final byproducts have been produced. So this is how detoxification process of the alcohol takes place in the liver. Now, everything is absolutely fine. Now tell me, what happens if this ethanol metabolism is impaired? Especially when there is a problem with the ALDH, that is acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. What happens if there is a problem with the ALDH? So if there is a problem with the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, obviously the toxic metabolite called as acetaldehyde gets accumulated, right? And remember guys, so now we can say that unfortunately some individuals, especially those with the Asian race, Asian descent, have inherited deficiency of the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, right? So they have the those who have inherited deficiency of the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. In those individuals, there will be too much accumulation of the acetaldehyde, rather getting converted into acetate. And remember, this enzyme deficiency is mainly caused by a glutamate to lysine mutation. It's mainly caused by glutamate to lysine mutation. Glutamate to lysine mutation in the gene which is coding the enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase 2, which is nothing but called as acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Got it? So the mutation in ALDH2, aldehyde dehydrogenase 2. So this mutated version of the ALDH2 has a decreased affinity for NAD+, right? And this causes excessive accumulation of the acetaldehyde and therefore exacerbates the hangover effects of the alcohol, right? That is what we can identify in this case. So this condition is popularly known as alcohol flushing reaction, or because it is most often seen in the Asian individuals, it is also called as Asian flush, right? Yeah. So this is what we need to know, what happens if the ethanol metabolism is impaired. Right? Now what I'll do is, let me explain about, so what are the effects of the alcohol metabolism on gluconeogenesis. So let me write impact on gluconeogenesis. Now concentrate on the explanation part guys, because it is purely conceptual over here. So if you remember, I have told you that large amount of NADH has been produced. NADH has been produced in the alcohol metabolism, right? Metabolism. Remember this point very clearly. Remember this point now. Now tell me, so how the energy is produced in the TCA cycle? How the energy is produced in the TCA cycle? Can we say that TCA cycle is also producing NADH? Yes, TCA cycle is also producing NADH. So in the normal metabolic pathway, what is happening? Glucose gets converted to pyruvate, right? In the process called as glycolysis. Pyruvate gets converted to acetyl coenzyme A. This process is called pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. And this acetyl coenzyme A enters into TCA cycle, right? Finally, the end products which are produced are carbon dioxide and water. And in this process, what is happening? NADH has been produced. And even in the PDH complex also, NADH has been produced, right? NADH has been produced. Now, if there is already plenty of NADH, because of consumption of alcohol. So what PDH complex will think is, what is the need for me to convert from pyruvate to acetyl-CoA? There is no need, because already NADH is present. And in the same way, the TCA cycle also will think in the same manner, what is the need for me to produce NADH, because NADH is already present. So there will be decrease in the activity of the TCA cycle. There will be decrease in the activity of the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. So there will be accumulation of the acetyl coenzyme A, and there will be accumulation of the pyruvate. So acetyl coenzyme A will be accumulated. I'll tell you what are the effects of this also. Acetyl coenzyme A will be accumulated because TCA cycle will be not working properly, because the main goal of the TCA cycle is to produce NADH, energy, and the final products of carbon dioxide and water. When NADH is already there, because of the ethanol metabolism, the TCA cycle is not working. Accumulation of the acetyl coenzyme A. Same thing happens with the PDH complex. So there will be increased conversion of pyruvate. Got it, guys? So this is what we always should say that. So always there will be increase in the NADH to NAD ratio. Increase in the NADH to NAD ratio. This is what is happening in the alcohol metabolism. So increased accumulation of the pyruvate, can we say that enters into the another metabolic pathway to produce lactate? And increase in the production of lactate is responsible for lactic acidosis, metabolic acidosis. So can we say that this metabolic acidosis is attributed to the excessive consumption of the alcohol, right? So this is what you need to remember. So whenever there is a high NADH and NAD plus ratio, this triggers the activation of other reactions that convert NADH back to NAD. So in this, the main important thing is the conversion of pyruvate to lactate, which creates a state of lactic acidosis by preventing the oxidation of lactate to pyruvate. Got it, guys? And also the second important pathway, whenever the acetyl-CoA is not entering into the TCA cycle properly, so whatever may be the oxaloacetate which is present gets converted to malate. So what will happen is TCA cycle, let me write here, TCA cycle is not working properly. So acetyl-CoA is not doing its normal function by producing malate to oxaloacetate. You know the TCA cycle pathway. So whenever acetyl-CoA is not working, what happens is there will be already from various other metabolic pathways, oxaloacetate will be produced. Actually, the oxaloacetate should actually enter into the normal TCA cycle pathway. But instead what happens, whenever there is excessive NADH which is already there in the mitochondria, so there will be conversion of oxaloacetate. There is a conversion of oxaloacetate to malate. Remember? So this is one reaction which is happening because of a high NADH to NAD ratio. Not only this, whenever there is a high NADH to NAD ratio, it triggers inhibition. Let me write very important point here. It triggers inhibition of gluconeogenesis enzymes which are dehydrogenases. Gluconeogenesis enzymes. The key gluconeogenesis enzymes which are dehydrogenases. So resulting in fasting hypoglycemia. So whenever there is an inhibition of gluconeogenesis enzymes, first tell me why the gluconeogenesis is happening. Gluconeogenesis is very, very important in the fasting states where the predominant hormone is the glucagon, which converts non-carbohydrate precursors to produce glucose to maintain normal blood glucose level in the fasting states, right? So if gluconeogenesis is not working, can we say that it develops fasting hypoglycemia? This is again because of increase in the NADH and NAD ratio. There will be inhibition of a key gluconeogenesis enzymes, especially the dehydrogenase enzymes, resulting in fasting hypoglycemia. So in addition what happens is, do you remember DHAP? What is this? dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So this dihydroxyacetone phosphate gets converted to glycerol 3-phosphate. Tell me, what is the normal pathway of the dihydroxyacetone phosphate? Should actually convert into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Should actually convert into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate enters into the glycolytic pathway. Right? Glycolytic pathway. But this is not working properly. So then what happens is, this dihydroxyacetone phosphate gets converted to glycerol 3-phosphate. So for what the glycerol 3-phosphate is used for? And this glycerol 3-phosphate combines with free fatty acids. So to form the compound called as triacyl glycerols. So dihydroxyacetone phosphate gets converted to glycerol to form triacyl glycerols. So there will be increase in the biosynthesis of triacyl glycerols. This is one pathway. Another important pathway, let me tell. Did I say that TCA cycle is not working? Yes. If TCA cycle is not working, which compound is accumulated? Acetyl coenzyme A. Right? So what is the first molecule of the fatty acid biosynthesis? Acetyl coenzyme A. So whenever acetyl coenzyme A gets accumulated, right? Whenever acetyl coenzyme A gets accumulated, it enters into other bypass pathways called as ketone body synthesis, and also fatty acid biosynthesis. So fatty acid biosynthesis is nothing but increase in the triacyl glycerols. So in one pathway, the dihydroxyacetone phosphate gets converted to glycerol 3-phosphate, which in turn incorporated to the free fatty acids to increase production of triacyl glycerols. In another pathway, because of the increase in the NADH plus and NAD ratio, because of accumulation of these NADH plus, and whenever the TCA cycle is not working properly, this accumulated acetyl coenzyme A is routed towards the ketone body synthesis as well as fatty acid biosynthesis. So now you see what is happening. Increase in the ketone body synthesis when you consume alcohol. Increase in the fatty acid biosynthesis, that is triacyl glycerols, when you consume alcohol. Right? And also there will be a fasting hypoglycemia what will develop when somebody is consuming alcohol. And also there will be increase in the production of lactate from the pyruvate called as lactic acidosis. So lactic acidosis, fasting hypoglycemia, increase in the ketone body synthesis, fatty acid biosynthesis, all these are attributed to the alcohol metabolism. So this is how it disrupts the gluconeogenesis pathways also. Remember? So the most important consequences of all the reactions which I have explained is shunting of all the resources away from the gluconeogenesis. So in this condition, the liver cannot produce glucose during fasting, responsible for the development of fasting hypoglycemia. Right? So that is the reason ketogenesis. So this ketogenesis and lactic acidosis therefore causes increase in the anion gap metabolic acidosis. All the points have to concentrate, guys, because I'm interconnecting one to each other. There will be resulting in an anion gap metabolic acidosis where the signs and symptoms are similar to diabetic ketoacidosis. Right? Similar to diabetic ketoacidosis, because extra acetyl-CoA or accumulated acetyl-CoA will be diverted to ketone body synthesis also. Not only with the ketone body synthesis, there will be the clinical manifestations similar to diabetic ketoacidosis. It's also because of the accumulation of lactic acidosis. Right? So this is what we need to know about all the details which are related to the alcohol metabolism and the details of its cycle. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. and tune for the next video. Take care.